What's going on, everybody? It's JPierce again. I am JPierce on Instagram, and I am JPierce Art on Twitter. Come and find me. There'll be links in the description. Here today with another image walkthrough tutorial for you guys. This is going to be a super fun one. This red tree in a snowy forest. Got a lot of requests for people wanting to know how to create this image. So we're going to walk through it. There's some very cool techniques. So let's go ahead and get started. I am working in Cinema 4D and Octane, and I'm going to be using some pretty basic textures and maybe a little Quixel stuff and some free assets. But mainly, if you need, the one thing that you're going to definitely need is Forester. As you know, I use Forester in so much of my work. So we're going to start off with a tree because there's going to be just a few aspects to this. It's mainly just this tree is the hero of this scene, and so we'll work a bit on the tree and then we'll jump into doing the surrounding. But we're going to start with this tree, and I am going to go to the tree library. I'm going to turn off this change materials because I'm going to use my own materials. I'm going to change this over to a eucalyptus, and you see it brought in materials anyway. That's fine. I can just delete these. I'm going to bring in a couple materials here. We're going to grab, I have a presets library here. And we're going to grab this leaf here and this bark here, and I'll show you what these look like in the node editor. So I'm just going to applying these to what is the preset tags for this. So this is the trunk, the branch, the leaf. I usually set this to 3x1 tiles, and then this one also 3x1 tiles. And I'll show you what this looks like in the node editor. I'm going to pin my node editor right here, working on single screen to show tutorial, which is fine. Yeah, so we've got just a simple leaf setup, different colors corresponding to different colors for the tree. So I know I'm doing red leaves, so let's go ahead and change these colors to red. And what this random color node does is that it's going to pick random colors in between and assign it to the different objects. So, and then it's mixing in with a multiply node with this leaf texture here, and then using just that same leaf texture as a normal map to give it some extra life. And then we're piping that color into the transmission so that when you can see my live viewer is not updating, but there we go. Now we have our red tree, and I always want to be working in path tracing, and I like to set my max samples down to 350, and the GI clamp, I used to use a lower number, but I think 40 is fine. It gives you a little bit more bounce. 4 was a little too low, so I'm using a little bit of a higher number these days. Okay, cool, awesome. Now we're gonna get into working on this tree. So I'm gonna bring in a light source and just kind of angle it so that it's facing from this side. And I actually like to have my scene set up in a particular direction because I'm a 4-panel view user. So I know I want my light to kind of be pointing. If you follow this little blue line, that's the direction the sun is pointing. So kind of from behind and to the side, something like that should work fine. Now the first thing I want to do, if you're having trouble with forester being slow when you're trying to generate ideas for the tree. What I do is I just knock down this stuff when I'm like, okay, I need to focus on the trunk right now. So focusing on the trunk first, I'm going to just bring all that stuff down, bring all the render levels down. We're going to the trunk. We're going to increase the height some, and I'm also going to switch over to hidden line because it's easier to see your subdivisions and stuff when you do this. So, and then maybe we will, this is always very artistic, you kind of just play around. I increase the radius. This root flare's strength will push out the bottom, which I think helps it to look more natural and less like it's kind of just sticking out of the ground. And then when I do that, I usually go to like 7 flares, so that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 around, and then increase the number of sides, so like the subdivisions around, and go up to like maybe double this to like 50, so that gives us a little bit more fidelity in there. And the root flare bias will kind of like, you can see what's happening when I do that. It sort of pushes the flares up and down the trunk. So that'll probably work for those settings. And then I'm going to take this waves X and just turn this up. And this is like one of the easiest ways to make kind of a twisted looking gnarly tree. So what we have here is this kind of twisted tree, and it's looking good already. And let's go ahead and increase the radius some more. And maybe this top point, we need to kind of clamp it down a little. So this is the profile for the trunk, and this will control, see the top and kind of give you an idea of that little edge up there. So that looks pretty good for our trunk. Maybe we'll just add a little bit of displacement, or turbulence, I mean, to it. Not too much, but just a little variation so it doesn't look like a perfect S shape, So just add a little bit of turbulence, maybe something like this, and then a little less. So that gives us a nice looking, like kind of a craggy looking tree trunk. So cool, that's a good start. Next we will we'll bring our subdivision levels back, or our branch levels back. We'll bring them all the way back for now. Again, you can always adjust these if you're if it's going slowly for you. So what we're going to do is we're just going to play around with some settings for our tree. I think what I'll do first is increase this spread angle, and then start pruning out towards the edges some of these other branch levels. I have some other tutorials where I work on trees, so I definitely encourage you to check those out too. There's a lot of tips and tricks, but if you just follow along here, you'll see some of the settings that I'm changing that I commonly use to create interesting looking trees. I think what I want to do next is maybe prune out some of these branches a little more. Maybe this one needs to get pushed out farther. And maybe these ones are a little too long. That's looking cool. Now I want to add in some flattening, so I'm going to go through each level of branches and find this flatten branches setting here and start turning those up. And that gives you, I think, what is a really interesting and cool look. You don't want to overdo it. but it definitely adds a lot of interest in here. And so next we're gonna, I think we need a few more at the top there. So we can always like change around the number of branches and everything. And yeah, honestly, that's looking really cool. I think like I want to adjust this though. You know, as you work, you can always go back and kind of change things. But I think this trunk got a little too wide down here. But I do want it to spread out at the bottom, and then I want to increase, I think, my waves again to really push the cragginess of it, I think, a little bit more. And that's looking really cool. So then I'm going to add, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to duplicate the tree, and I'm going to create these like extra sticks coming out that are like have no leaves on them. So what you can do for this is just duplicate the tree, go to the leaves, turn off leaves, and then I can go to the tree parameters and start modify the seed. So now I have like two different trees overlapping each other, and there's like these branches sticking out, so you get these cool looks. And then of course I don't really need so many, maybe about half as many, and then I get these like kind of like branches sticking out, and that helps to really like make it look a lot more natural and less computer generated. Just kind of a combination of two different little trees there. So our hero tree is looking really good. Sometimes you want to make sure too that this trunk isn't interfering with your main trunk, so you can just take the trunk radius of that inner tree and kind of bring it down so that it's not bothering the other tree, or getting in the way, you know, or creating weird artifacts in your texture. Speaking of which, I want to bring that radius back up again now. But I want to, I think, adjust this spline again so it's a little bit narrower at the top. Now we're getting something that looks really cool. This is a very cool looking tree now. So I'm going to turn these off because I want to do next. You can see I've created something that's actually kind of a lot different, but either way, I kind of like this one better anyway. We're going to talk about next, we're going to do these roots. I'm going to show you how I put together roots very quickly. Now this I have saved normally, but I want to show you the process for it. I'm going to duplicate this tree again, and kind of go back and reset it to what is essentially like a very simplified tree, the eucalyptus in here. And we're going to turn the settings all the way down again so that we've got just a trunk and a level 1 branches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the root flares. We don't need any of these flares. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a single root, and this radius probably doesn't need to be so high. And then the branches, we're going to increase their length a little, like this maybe. And then we're going to need more subdivisions in the branches, so we'll take this to 25. That gives us more subdivisions in here. And then we're going to give it some turbulence to make them kind of move around. And then you never want, you know, to see these kind of poking through the geometry, so we'll reduce the radius. Turn up this reduce radius on branch, which will try and detect the parent radius, kind of. And then we're going to turn up the taper. And then we're going to adjust the taper bias here in branch global. That looks pretty good. Now in the tree parameters global controls, there's this flatten tree setting, and we're going to flatten it out. Turn that all the way up to 1. So now we have this kind of like flat looking branchy thingy, and that is a great starting place for a root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bend deformer. I'm going to hold shift and click on the bend deformer, and that's going to make it a child and automatically do this operation fit to parent. So then I can take this strength and start bending it, and that's cool, but it's not the direction I want. So I think the angle I want is 90, and that looks right. And I'm going to check this thing called keep length. That helps to constrain so it doesn't get too distorted. Then I'm going to take the bend deformer and just resize it down a little bit. And it's probably a little too strong right now, so probably just needed something like 60, 65. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Alt and put it inside of a cloner. And then I'm going to take this cloner, I'm going to switch it to radial, and I'm going to take my tree and I'm going to hold Alt and press G, group it inside of a null, so that when I rotate this, I can I'll have control over what's happening. So if I rotate it like this, you can see that I'm getting this circular roots. I think I want 6, and I want the radius of this cloner to be 0. And now you can see I've very easily created kind of a root system here. Now the bend is probably too strong still. You can basically you know, play with these settings, the rotation inside the null, and the bend power, the bend strength, to get different looks. And then you can use the green arrow to kind of adjust how it's being bent. Now all you have to do is drop it inside of your original tree, hit the PSR button to turn our other tree back on, and now I can just take this and kind of put it inside here. And obviously it's too big, so you can scale it down, and as you do that, it's gonna kind of mess around with the turbulence a little bit. That's fine. And now we've got these cool roots coming out, and you can just, if I want more, I can just add to the cloner. It's all dynamic, so I can go in and say that I want more turbulence on the trunk, which I think I definitely do, you know, to kind of like, you know, create a little bit more interest in there. And I can turn the turbulence scale down as well. And, you know, I could add a random effector in here to kind of, you know, turn these a little bit and make it seem a little bit less like they're just the same root cloned around. But it really doesn't honestly matter. I think it looks fine as it is. And it doesn't even matter that it's just kind of slapped in there intersecting with the geometry, because once you render, it ends up looking very clean. So I think I want to go back down to only maybe around, you know, 7 or so roots there. Sometimes I try to line them up with the root flares that I've created in my trunk. So so there it is. So there's like a cool tree, some cool trunk, and some like cool looking roots coming out. I can always go back and, you know, kind of art direct in here, you know, how many of these branches I want, and how many of these branches I want, and what I want to do with, like, maybe I think I liked having them up higher like that. So you can change this insertion bias, and that will, like, if I turn it up, it'll put them lower on the trunk, and up here it puts them higher up. So like I kind of liked it being a little higher up like that. So, and then you have this like one weird branch down here that's kind of sticking out, and I don't know, I think that's kind of cool. I think trees that have unique shapes are more interesting, and they're also more natural looking. So that's what I feel like. It adds to the sense of mystery, adds to the sense of interest. And then maybe in here I'm going to play around with this swivel value and see if we can get some different looks here. And maybe we'll change the pruning on this too. And we'll change that swivel vary. And, this just like lets you distribute the branches in different ways. Cool. So now the other thing that's neat about this is like if I have this kind of growing on a hill, I can take these roots and kind of turn them, to align with the topography a little bit, which is a nice added bonus. So that's exactly what I'm going to do, because I have this kind of a sloped hill in my scene. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a ground plane for us. So this will be 4,000 by 4,000. I'll use 250 segments, that's fine. And then I'm going to select the plane, and I'm going to hold down Shift and add a displacer. And that's going to put the displacer underneath it. And if you've seen me sculpt or create floors before, you'll know that I love to use this gradient technique. And what I do is just add a gradient and add a little bit of turbulence to it. The turbulence feature of the gradient really helps to create some cool looks, and then I just increase the height, and it's kind of going the wrong direction. I don't want it to go that direction. I want it to go the other direction. So very easy. I can just right click and invert gradient. And I'm seeing this little weird thing happening over here. Just check that absolute box and we'll get rid of that. So now I'm going to create a material for our snow on the ground. This will be very simple, very extremely simple. I'm just going to use a regular diffuse material, an Octane diffuse material, and I'm just going to add a Octane noise to the bump, and we'll go ahead and apply that. And let's adjust our lighting, see what kind of noise pattern we get on there, and that looks pretty nice. It really doesn't have to be anything complicated. I think that this can be very, very simple, and it can still look really nice. Maybe we just want a little bit more displacement though on here. A little bit more turbulence. That's too much. Let's push the height a little more. And maybe something right in there will be nice. And let's position our tree in place here. And like I said, I can rotate these roots and move them around, and it's very simple. And you get a nice looking like root pattern coming out, and that's very helpful. And you can always go in and adjust the bend settings so to make sure they're not popping out of the ground. This floor doesn't look very good though. So this is probably partially to do with our lighting, but also maybe too much on the turbulence. So you just kind of play around until it looks good, and maybe we'll go into our noise and add a few more octaves. That gives us a little bit more detail, so that looks nice now. And then you can adjust the lighting and kind of see what's happening in there, and that actually looks very nice. Now maybe we can add a little bit more turbulence back in, and that's looking pretty nice. And that's some nice looking fine snow. You don't want it to be overly detailed and distracting. As long as it convinces you that it's snow, then you're good. So I'm just adjusting the roots again as I'm moving the foreground. Again, this is all just artistic decisions that you can make on the fly. You can create some really cool looking roots this way. And then now, I think the next step here is I'm just going to grab a rock from my library. I have some free rocks that I've found and collected over the years. This one I've used before. It's from Sketchpad. It's a very simple and very easy to use rock. And I'm also going to grab this material that I have. It's a setup, I call it my snow rig. And whenever I do snow scenes, I can use it. It's just a handy little kind of preset that I've built. So I have a tutorial out on doing snow and how you can use this fall off node to create dusting of snow. So this is kind of the setup for it. So all I have to do is copy these nodes and bring them over to my rock material. And then I just pipe in my original color channel and then mix it in with the snow channel. So what this is a fall off map, and it's set to normal versus vector 90 degrees. The skew factor is 1, and then it's piped into a color correction with a contrast jacked way up, and then that acts as the amount for a mix node, and then it mixes white, which is the quote-unquote snow, and the original color based on the direction of the snow. So that's the snow rig set of nodes. It's just 4 little nodes. So now as I turn my little rock around, you can see it's getting snow on each little area. So now I can start to be a little artistic here, and I'm going to rotate my rock and kind of get it into a place where I like it. And clearly now I need a camera. So I'm going to create an Octane camera. And I will turn the camera on. And then while we're at it, we'll set up some of our standard Octane settings. I think for this scene I left the focal length at 36. That's fine. I don't have any problem doing that. In the thin lens, we don't need any depth of field yet, but we could add that later. In our camera imager, I always turn on the AI denoiser, and I'll usually set up the saturate to white and the highlight compression. But for this scene, I probably just need like a little, like a 0.2 on the highlight compression, because the sun is going to be coming in once I add my fog, but I'll show you that later. So we've got our camera, and now we can start placing things in our scene. So I wanted this rock to be like right here in the foreground, and that's probably fine right there. And I was going to add a second rock over here that's almost out of the frame, and what I'm going to do is kind of stand it up so that it's casting a shadow, and that like sort of adds to the it adds compositionally to what we got going on. So that's cool looking, and maybe I just need to adjust my camera just a little bit. Always kind of looking for the exact right composition. So now we can start adding some more rocks. So I'll just like go through and add a couple in here, and start rotating them into place. And as you go through and add these, you can make decisions about where they look good or what looks good. You know, you can kind of just duplicate and move them around and then rotate. It's nice because these are lightweight and you can get a lot of mileage out of just one rock. So put a couple more back in the background over here. As long as you just keep rotating them and kind of never giving them the same like visual profile, you can kind of just reuse the same rock. And I really just, there's only a few rocks that I ever really use in my scenes. You know, I have a couple of sharp ones and I have a couple of round ones. And then just using color correction to make different colors. You know, if you want brown rocks and gray rocks and, you know, red rocks, whatever you like to have, whatever you feel like you need in your scene, you can recolor them. And once you find a few good ones that have like nice normal maps and displacements, then I kind of just stick with those ones, you know. So we have our snow rig, and let's go ahead and add that snow rig again onto our trunk material. Now I think this trunk is a little too brown looking, so let's go ahead and decrease the saturation and increase the gamma to darken it down a little. That looks good. Also, that's going to help with the contrast when we add our snow. So hit paste, and there's our snow. Pipe in our original color map and then into the diffuse. Now, off the bat, it doesn't look that great. We see a little bit of whiteness in here, but that's about it. So let's go in and try and work on some of these settings. So if I adjust it some, you can see now it's starting to get white again. Let's make our trunk a little darker to increase the contrast. And then you can also kind of play around with your normal power and see what happens with that. If I take this normal and increase the power to like 2, you'll get some different looks. But what I really want is to make it a little sharper. So I think what I do is adjust this gamma in this color correction here, and then play with the skew factor again. And I think that what we're seeing here is that it's not sharp enough for what I want, but you are seeing like a nice, you're seeing a nice dusting. So I'm going to go ahead and add a displacement to this. I have this free displacer material. This is another kind of tree bark, and I'm going to add just the displacement from this material to the bark that I'm working on, which is this one. And I'm just going to add it to the displacement. And as you can see, it created a big mess. So I need to actually duplicate this material out because I don't want to add the displacement to the branches. I only want it on that trunk. So I'm going to create a second material and I'm going to add it to everything except for the main trunk. And this will be called branch material, and it will have no displacement. And let's check to make sure that we put the branch material properly on everything except for the original trunk we did. Okay. So it looks like I did it backwards though. Sometimes when you move a lot of materials around at once, Octane gets confused. So let's make sure. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we just have this displaced material just on the trunk here. And let's see what we can do with this. We'll add a transform node and see what happens when we move it around, make it a little smaller. Yeah, that's not what we want. We want to go the other way. Well, I said 20, no, 2. There we go. So now we're seeing a little bit more life in there. And I'm going to set this to 1K, set the mid-level to 1.5, and double this size. So now we're getting some cool looking texture in the bark there. And let's just really work this color correction some more. So as I change the normal settings and the gamma and the skew factor in these areas, now you're starting to see some more contrast popping in to the tree bark there. So that's starting to give us a nice looking dusting effect. So these are settings sometimes you just have to play around with. Hopefully you can pause the video and see where I landed there. I'm going to add a little more displacement on this trunk. So I'm going to go into the trunk and add some more displacement. Just kind of creates this lumpiness that the snow can kind of cling to, you know. That looks pretty cool. That's maybe a little too much. Cool. So we got kind of like a trunk with some snow on it, and you know, you can go back and kind of play with these, you know, play with these settings and reduce it, increase it, whatever you feel like looks cool to your eye, go for it. Now I'm going to add this kind of little rise in the land for our tree to sit on. I just created a cube. I meant to create a landscape, and I'm going to position it so that it's under our tree. I'm just going to create this as a little bump for our tree to sit on, and we'll adjust the seed until I see something that's good. I want to create just a little mound for it to sit on. Maybe just something like that. Now we can, oops. Now we can bring our tree back up. Just so it has something to kind of wrap itself onto. And we're also going to use this I made this way too wide. There we go. So you can create these little rises and put things on them. Things like trees. It's very fun. So you can create all these little details. You can also adjust the seed if you think that that will help, or you get a different look. And then obviously I'm going to, where was my seed before? I liked the other seed. Sometimes you're just playing and you lose track of what you're doing. So we're going to add the snow, our snow texture onto there. And then I think, of course, we're going to need a few more segments here. So we'll go to 250 by 250 just to give it that nice little bit of extra love, a little detail in there. And then I'm going to create this scattering of leaves on the ground, because it looked really cool to have all these leaves scattered on the ground. So I have a leaf texture. This is from CG Bookcase. Head on over to CG Bookcase and support him on Patreon because he's a great creator. And I'm going to adjust this hue down to, I think, 2, maybe a little less, 0.15. Yeah, minus 0.15, like right in there. And I'm going to get rid of this displacement. We don't need a displacer on this. And I'm going to create a cloner. And inside of the cloner, I'm going to put a polygon. And then for the cloner, I'm going to call it, I'm going to make the mode object. And the object I'm going to use is going to be the landscape that we just made. So we've got our little planes cloning along here. The polygon, I want to change the orientation to Z. And then add the texture onto it. And it's probably too large, so we'll go like maybe 5 by 5. And when you do these cloners, you always want to use render instance, and then we will increase the amount to like 250. And I think Z minus, I think it is, they're kind of just stuck down, or they're a little too small maybe. Now you can see they're spreading out along here. I have it set on surface, and what you want to do is, I can also use a plane effector. If they're not really like doing what you want them to be doing, you can just go add a plane effector. Oops. And just modify their position. Yeah, see. Too big, so we'll go with maybe 10 by 10 or 20 by 20. Let's go 20 by 20. And we'll use a random effector as well. Don't really need the position to change, but we want to do some randomized rotation, but not in that axis. I think just in this axis, yeah. And then we can also randomize the scale a little. We'll go 0.1. And you just want them to be sitting right there. So, you know, as you do this, you know, use your artistic eye. To generate, you know, things that you think look interesting. So I think what I did was I kind of just rotated this around until it, you know, gave me kind of the look I was looking for. Increased the height of it a little. Maybe it's a little too big, and, you know, just repositioning it so that it creates kind of a nice little rise for the tree to sit on. And then, you know, you can just keep increasing this count if you think there needs to be more. When you use render instance, you can just really crank this. Okay, way too many. Just wanted to get to the point where there was too many, and then I could determine, you know. What if I left this here and I tried it like that? It's always gonna kind of glitch on you when you use these. But yeah, so you can use this to create different looks for scattering some leaves on the ground, and you know, you can use a cloner, you can use an Octane scatter if you want. I am going to leave it there, and I think you can figure it out from there. Maybe, I don't know. My tendency is one to always make these perfect, but that's part of the joy of doing, you know, daily renders and stuff, is that we get to let things go when they're not perfect. You know, and you kind of just use your eye and say, that looks pretty cool. You know, that looks pretty cool. Add a few more leaves. And then, you know, if you want to, you can also just place a few leaves by hand. You can just bring one in and say, I want that to be, what orientation, Y. There you go. Now, obviously, you don't want to be going through and hand placing each leaf in the scene. That would be madness. But a couple for added interest is totally doable and totally fun to do, you know. Just add a couple here in the foreground. Make that look really nice. And then I can add another rock and maybe bring this rock in here. Give it a little rotation. And I think also that I want to adjust the color on this rock too. What I'll do is I'm just going to desaturate it and make it a little darker. Awesome. Now we're starting to look really cool. I'm going to take my my ground plane. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm just going to hold down Shift, or I'm going to hold down Control rather, and drag it into the background. So now it's kind of back there, you can see. And I'm going to make it a little wider probably. And I'm going to add an Octane scatter. And, you know, this is, I'm not keeping myself organized here, but I will do that now. So this is all leaf stuff. This is all my rocks. And that's a little better. I'll call this BG. because that's the ground in the background. And I want to get another tree, so I'm just going to duplicate this one and put it inside my scatter. And then I'll take my scatter and apply it to the vertex. And obviously, just ridiculous, way too many trees. Only need maybe about 50. And these, I'm gonna reset it again. I'm gonna go back again to our favorite eucalyptus, and I'm going to actually just reuse the snow material and apply it to the leaves. I don't know why there is so many. Oh, it's set on vertex. So set this to surface and change the normal align so they're straight up and down. And then if I bring this, kind of over here, you can see the kind of tree that I'm making. And for background trees, what I usually do is I just take the height, the trunk height, and bring it way up. And then I usually take maybe the prune parent, bring that down a little. And then I think in this scene, I also had a good amount of turbulence in the trunk. It's kind of a waggly little tree. And then just make it a little bigger. And essentially what I had going on back here, I can group these together now. Call it PG. I just had this kind of tree line, and it was actually rotated a little bit so that it was denser on this side. I also need to apply a random effector, so I'm going to hit MoGraph effector random, apply it to my scatter, and then for the parameters, I just want this rotation so that they're not all facing the same way. And then we may need a few more, but we'll get to that in a second to fill it in a little. Let's push it back in space some. You can always, when you're using a plane, kind of just adjust the size of it. And then as you go, you can play around with the seed as well. And maybe that will be a little better. Now, obviously, it looks like it's just smashed up right next to my tree, and I don't want that. So we need to create some depth, and we're going to do that by using a fog volume. And I will show you. This is our tutorial test. I have a volume preset for fog volume, and I'll show you what this looks like. It's set to 6,000 by 6,000 by 6,000. Voxel size is 800. And then under the medium tab, I have a volume medium, and it's set to 0.1 and 60 with white absorption, white scattering, and the scattering phase set to 0.7. Those are pretty baseline settings for how I use this. And then you see this big green box. My tree is here. My background is here. So I want this fog box to kind of just be like back here-ish. So I'm going to do it like that. I'm going to rotate it so that it's kind of lines up with how my background is aligned. And yeah, this is pretty much how I created this scene. Now, what I can tell you is it takes a long time to kind of maybe adjust this lighting and get it to a place where you like it. But I think that I had something like this. And that was pretty good for me. I definitely liked something like that, I think. And you know, you can also reduce the number of like branches in this background trees so that they're kind of create these. They're a little bit more, you know, interesting looking. You know, you don't want to have kind of these boring looking trees back here. So you can play around with these, do all sorts of different cool things in the background, and you know. Okay, cool. So now I'm gonna take it into After Effects and just add a few more elements to it, and we'll get it looking really cool. So I am rendering out a beauty pass, a denoised pass, and a Z depth pass. And the Z depth pass looks like this. And basically, you can control it in here. And I think that where it's set right now is fine. But you can see it basically is, it renders out the depth of everything. So I'm going to leave it where it was, 78. That's fine. So I'm going to hit render on this, and then I'll see you over in After Effects. Okay, so here we are in After Effects. I have my 3 passes, my beauty pass, my denoised pass, and my Z pass. I'm going to just drag in the beauty pass to create a new comp, and I'm going to hit BN because I only want this to be 1 frame long because I'm doing a still image. So, and then I'll drag in my denoised pass. And you can see it's just a little bit cleaned up. And then I'm going to take my Z pass and drop it into a new comp and just rename it Z. And go inside here and create a new solid, white solid, and put it in the background to have a backdrop for it. Then I'm going to take my Z pass and put it on top. I'm going to use this effect called null unmult, which is like a reverse multiply. And then I'll take an effect, do a color correction tint, and do something in this kind of a greenish area, something like that. And now I'm going to add a mask. And I'm going to feather this way out just to add some color and depth and life to my background here. Maybe just something like that. You can kind of constrict it to areas where you like it to look, and then if you feel like it's a little too much in the foreground still, you can adjust. I'll show you what I'm doing. You can basically, you can adjust the values of your Z depth pass using our curves. So it almost is like having your Z depth control, like in cinema. You can see I can get all the way to the front, all the way to the back. I'm just going to pull it back a little because I feel like it's in front of our hero tree a little too much. And maybe this is just a little oversaturated color-wise. Maybe we need to go a little more blue as well. That's cool. And then I'm gonna add a black solid that I'm gonna use as a vignette. I don't really want it up in here because the light's coming from up there. So that looks nice. That helps to focus the eye. Vignettes are always a good idea. Just don't overdo it. You know, just a little tiny bit of little extra. This probably is too strong. Pull it back a little, just using the opacity. Then I want to add another black solid, and I'm just going to use the old Video Copilot optical flares, fantastic plugin. I'm going to hit clear all, say yes, change to lens orbs, change the scale to 1, change the brightness to 1000, change the illumination radius to 100%, and the number of objects to probably like 800 or something, and then the brightness random and the scale random, we're going to turn those up, and set the blend mode to screen, and get a little bit of snow. And then I can do this here. Now I gotta go back inside, make it a little bigger, go 2 instead of 1. That gives us a little bit of snow. Very easy way to just add a snow field. And then I'm going to add a adjustment layer, and I'm gonna let's see, I'm gonna do curves first. Actually, use levels, and just to correct for some of this flatness that tends to happen with 3D renders. Gets very dull, so I like to bring in these levels just a little bit, and crank up the gamma. I think I do want this to be a little more green, too green. Do something in there. So now we're getting some nice contrast, and it's looking very cool. Then I'm gonna add another, let's see, maybe I do want this like to be all the way up in here. So you can play around with this, but you know, there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with your Z-Pass in terms of color and things. Maybe I just need a little bit less. Looking very cool. I need to adjust this global color to white so that it's actually have white snow. That's good. And this is probably too large now. 1.5. Good. Okay, so that's cool. We got a little bit of snowstorm, you know, but the sun is coming out, and that looks very nice. And I think our darks are really too dark now. So we'll just go in, you know, tweaking these. I took the gamma up too much. I'm going to reset this. So I definitely want to push the colors, but not too far. Then I'm going to add an adjustment layer. I'm going to change the mode to color, and I'm going to go to Effect, Utility, Apply Color LUT, which stands for Lookup Table, and I can just try this one called Buyers. That looks pretty good. I think that's what I used before. So awesome. That's looking great. And then I'm just going to add it to the render queue, set out JPEG, and pick the right folder. And as a little bonus, I'll show you kind of the finishing touches that I like to add in Topaz Studio, which is a great little program. And my favorites here, I have a bunch of different presets that I like. I think for this one, I was using this impression, so you can use Topaz impression. Creates this really nice painterly look. So there you go. I'm going to save this out and show you what it looks like in the final. We'll go full screen with it. All right, this is what we made today, and it looks pretty cool. You know, you can always keep going, keep pushing, keep tweaking. You know, nothing's ever perfect, but you always get a little bit better every day. So I just want to say thank you again to everybody who's supported me on my channel, and I want you to make some stuff with this, and then send me your renders and send it to me on socials, and I will repost. So hope you had a lot of fun doing this. I hope you learned a lot. I hope that these techniques are helpful, and that it helps you to create things that connect with people and connect with yourself, and we can make a difference by making art together. So thank you again for being here and joining me. All right, have a great day and happy rendering.